Hey everyone, I wanted to let you know that I'll be attending Podcart Fest on April 10th. It's a virtual festival celebrating all things podcasts and art. It's free to attend so you can stop by, meet these amazing artists and podcasters. There's also going to be great panels, artist demos, and appearances by celebrity guests. Steve from Everything I Learned from Movies has more information, so I'm going to turn it over to him right now.
Hey everybody, join us on April 10th when we'll be hosting Podcart Fest, a celebration of podcasting and art. With so many incredible artists of all kinds being affected by the pandemic and shutting down of festivals in general, we wanted to bring them together to one incredible virtual festival and give you the opportunity to interact with them directly in their virtual booth, witness them demonstrate their marvelous skills on our live stream, show off some of their new products in their shops, and just have a great fun time in general at Podcart Fest. For the latest information, please follow us at Podcart Fest on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at podcartfest, that's PODCARTFEST, where you can stay up to date on which podcasters, crafters, actors, painters, directors, creators, and more will be featured. Oh, did I mention it's free? Because Podcart Fest is free, so you can pass that admission fee right along to an artist who needs your help in these desperate times, and have a bunch of fun with some amazing personalities while getting some unique gifts and art for yourself or a loved one. See you soon at Podcart Fest, hosted by Everything I Learned from Movies.
Welcome to Happily Ever Aftermath, the podcast that explores the movies that influenced how we view love and romantic relationships. Yes, there will be spoilers. I'm your host, Diana Rojex-Gonard. How are you going to learn anything about life if you refuse to live it? We're here to talk about Professor Marston and the Wonder Woman from 2017, and I'm very happy to join my guest, Mallory from Movie Lovers. Hi, Mallory.
Hi, Diana. Thanks for having me.
It is a pleasure to have you here. So this movie, Professor Marston and the Wonder Woman, you and I, we got talking, we met online, and you had suggested this. So if you could share with the audience, what made you decide this movie?
Sure. This is a movie that is very near and dear to my heart. I happen to be polyamorous. In this movie, the love story revolves around a triad, which is a type of polyamorous relationship made up of three people. And so it's a bit of that fairy tale romance movie that you don't really get to see in Hollywood for people like me. So me and my partner, Jonah, have been together for about 5.5 years, and we've been in a couple triads over our relationship. But yeah, so this movie it's something we have to watch yearly. We watch it to celebrate our lifestyle, and it's just so heartwarming. I love it.
Amazing. So this is actually a movie that has made it into a celebratory annual, or I wouldn't say annual, because you can celebrate as often as you'd like, but amazing. That's kind of wonderful, that especially for a movie that's just very recently made.
Yeah, the timing of it is exciting too. Like the year that we embarked on our polyamorous journey together was earlier in 2017 in the spring, and then this movie came out a little bit later in 2017. I think we saw it in like October of that year or something. So it was pretty brand new to our lives. We're like, oh my goodness, this is the love story we want.
Oh, that's incredible. That's and you watched it together?
We did. Yeah, we saw it in the theater.
Yeah, it could have been a situation where one of you saw it and then just wait, quick, come see this with me. No, that's even better that you got to experience it in real time together.
Yeah.
To those of you unfamiliar, so this is from the IMDb page about the movie, and it is the story of psychologist William Moulton Marston and his polyamorous relationship with his wife and their mistress, who would inspire his creation of the superheroine Wonder Woman, which of course these particular descriptions are always so reductive, and they're trying to fit it into one sentence, so there's so much going on in this story, of course, but that's just, so basically William Marston, his wife Elizabeth Marston, and their you called it a triad?
Yeah. So there's so many different formations of relationships you can have, but technically, I don't know if they ever refer to themselves as a triad in the movie at all, but That's kind of the terminology we use.
Right. And also, I'm also fascinated because I'm just like, ooh, I'm taking notes right now. I'm going to be learning so much about this.
Right?
Yeah. And the cast is Luke Evans, Rebecca Hall, Bella Heathcote, Connie Britton, which is interesting because Connie Britton is meant to be like the movie Hollywood blatant bad guy, which of course it's never so cut and dry, but it's a movie, so we have to have a shorthand for it. And also in the cast is J.J. Feild, Chris Conroy, and Oliver Platt, it's really interesting because a lot of these people, since this is based on the creator of Wonder Woman, which is an incredibly iconic superhero, and in fact I have propping up my microphone my Super Friends pillowcase.
Nice.
And I just looked down. I'm like, oh, Wonder Woman. Oh, okay, that's a fascinating coincidence, and I'm gonna run with it on that.
Right. Well, hey, and your name is Diana. That is Wonder Woman's name, so it's cool tie-in. We're big superhero nerds in this house too. So,
wow, even better.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's I swear, my parents didn't name me to be on brand for the podcast, but it's a great way for everything to line up today. So, the fact that the story is based off of, real life people, and you have the director who is, I want to get this right, Angela Robinson. She actually wrote and directed this. It's based on a true story. But of course, when it's based on a true story, you're going to have, conflicting things because, of course, things have happened, but things did not happen in the exact way we saw it, even though this is the story we're processing. So this is what we're taking in. If you're a comic book nerd, were you familiar with any of what was happening with the creator of Wonder Woman?
I can honestly say that I wasn't much of a superhero fanatic until this wave of movies that have kind of come out in my lifetime. Being born in 89, I kind of missed the comic book boat, and being a girl is kind of hit or miss as to whether you're going to be a comic book person or not. I feel like it's more of a boy thing, but that's total stereotype. So I wasn't really all that familiar with the history of Wonder Woman. She's definitely been one of my favorite superheroes in today's age, but my partner Jonah, he's a little bit older than me and a total superhero nerd, like from early childhood. So he was a bit more knowledgeable about everything that was going on when this movie came into our lives. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting origin story of where it all came from and how she was influenced by what Professor Marston did.
Right. And it's very easy to watch this movie and then just immediately take to the internet and start figuring out like, well, wait, like how much of that is, correct. And if you go back to, well, according to the internet, if you go back to the very, very early copies of Wonder Woman, you'll see the bondage that they refer to in the big, I'll call it the framing device of Professor Marston, William. I'll call him William. William being, kind of half interrogated by Connie Britton's character. So that was pretty interesting. But to the relationship itself, I mean, it's a very beautiful story. And can you tell me a little bit more about, instead of just like representation, what else about this particular relationship that's just kind of captured your imagination?
Yeah, I really, really love how much care the director, Angela Robinson, put into the crafting of this story. It's just such a beautiful love that grows between all three of them. I mean, it's such an interesting dynamic to start just with William or Bill, whatever you want to refer to him. They go back and forth between William and Bill in the movie. Between him and Elizabeth, they have this wonderful dynamic, and she's so smart and witty and crass. Swears a lot, and I mean, what is it? It starts in does it start in the 20s or start in the 30s?
I believe it was the 20s.
The 20s.
Yeah.
Prohibition was a thing. They were hiding the liquor.
Yes, they were hiding their liquor.
Yes. And so with their relationship kind of being the setting that we're brought into, with them being the solid base, and then they meet Olive, and how that love unfolds. It just, the way that they presented it on screen, it happens just like any other love story would happen. And I just love that the director took that much care to want to tell it like a normal love story and not so much focusing on, I mean, it does have a lot of themes throughout going on, or, you know, touching on how weird they are to everybody else once it kind of comes out what they're doing and who they are. But at the heart of it, watching them all fall in love and the different speeds at which they fall in love. I mean, as you're going through, you can kind of pinpoint those moments where you're like, oh, Olive is totally in love with Elizabeth, but Elizabeth doesn't know she's in love with Olive yet. Or it's pretty like clear from the beginning that Bill is very enamored with Olive, but she's not that interested in him until later in the movie, kind of more when she gets Elizabeth's approval. There's all the different layers of the disc theory tying into the submission and dominance play. So it's just, rambling now, but
no, because there's so many details happening in this movie, and to also give the listeners who haven't seen the movie a little bit more information, it begins at Radcliffe. Is where William is teaching, and so it's kind of hard to tell, but again, it's a shorthand thing where it's also a good a method of just getting the exposition in there. He's teaching, he's with Elizabeth, and they're already married, and she is appealing to get her degree from Harvard. Is it her PhD, I want to say?
Yeah, she wants to get her doctorate, but they're not allowing women yet at that point into Harvard, or to get, like, she can get a doctorate from Radcliffe, but it's a women's university. It's not the same standards, I guess, which brings me back to like Mona Lisa Smile, like the way that they touch on that sort of stuff in that movie too, because it's around that same, well, a little bit later, it's kind of closer to the 50s, but there's still that like female versus male in the collegiate setting kind of thing going on.
Exactly. And the thing is like, it was, I appreciated the prohibition part of it as well, because it's really, you know, pushing you into the 20s, because it did feel very 1950s-esque, where it's just, you know, the women are there, they're getting their degrees, but, you know, again, that Mona Lisa Smile thing, no, you get your degrees and then you get married, and that's your way through that. Right. So you mentioned, you know, you used the word crass as one of the words to describe Elizabeth, and I'll admit wholeheartedly, it was just like, I'm not used to seeing that kind of confidence in a woman, especially in a time frame like that. So for me, it was jarring, but that's also because of my own inexperience. And I'm just like, yes, she should be railing and she should be going for it. And then watching her succumb to her sadness every time she's rejected, in terms of, you know, her request to get the Harvard degree. And it's like, oh, I was rejected again. And, you know, I'm putting this work in this as well. But, you know, of course it's being, you know, looked aside because she just happens to be working with her husband. And of course the male and female dynamic of it is just heartbreaking, which, you know, I have not experienced that version of it, but at the same time, my heart goes out to her in that realm. So,
yeah, a lot of the groundwork that women in that time laid for us in terms of early feminism, much appreciated. They suffered through things we didn't have to, or they suffered through things so we didn't have to now.
Exactly. And speaking of which, the introduction of Olive's character, it's kind of great, because there is this bantering back and forth between Elizabeth and William, and how Elizabeth is just forthright with her husband, and it actually kind of set up my expectations of their relationship a little bit differently, because Elizabeth is just saying to her husband, just like, yeah, go for it. Yeah. And I was kind of curious what was happening there in that whole thing. What was your opinion of that beginning, the beginnings of that?
Right. Yeah. That scene that you're talking about. Yeah. When they're like sitting on the front steps and they're observing Olive's behavior as like a boy is kind of hitting on her, but she can't, like, they're so like scientifically picking it apart. She's like, look, our girl can't even look him in the eye or he's going to think that she's interested. And then the other girl that's sitting there hates her because she's so pretty and she's such a, a focus for everybody in the room, that kind of thing. But yeah, that scene really, really sets up a lot about their dynamic. And I absolutely love Elizabeth's line, I'm your wife, I'm not your jailer.
Yes.
That
which is
one of those moments that makes my heart sing, because that's the way that I feel in my relationship. We both, I'm bisexual. So between myself and my partner, we're kind of in the same boat in terms of like Professor Marston and Elizabeth. So her saying something like that out loud in a movie for people to hear and like, oh, a relationship can be like that. It doesn't have to be so like, I mean, jealousy still happens, and it still happens in this movie, as you see shortly thereafter, after that scene. But yeah, it's very, very indicative of their dynamic. I love it.
Yeah. And it's actually a beautiful example of what a relationship in terms of jealousy kind of comes up with. I'll pull down the curtain just a little bit, not too far, because I'm still a very antsy person when it comes to my own marriage. But listening to her talk about that, like in the I'm your wife, I'm not your jailer. In my head, I'm just like, absolutely, there's a physical attraction and there's all of these different things. So it totally stands to reason that she would have that. But the next level of that for me is just like the fact that she was just saying, sure, go for it. For me, it just that's when my head exploded, because I am in a monogamous relationship, but that piece of information aside, I am a jealous as hell person. So as much as I want to be this weird stereotype of like being the cool wife, talking about, oh yeah, she's pretty, I have what they discussed earlier with this like jealousy thing of when Olive and her friend were being analyzed by the husband and wife professors, and it's just, is it just like evolutionary? Possibly. Is it like societal learning? Yeah, but at the same time, it's just like, I have to learn to pull myself back and just go like, no, attraction happens and that's okay. And all this other stuff. Don't touch him. No, they're not even touching them. I've already gone off in a different direction. So
no,
it's irrelevant.
I feel you. It's honestly, that's this sort of conversation is something that is very common, especially on my end. Like if I'm talking to someone about my lifestyle for the first time, these kinds of things are the first things that come out, because jealousy is such a normal part of monogamous relationships. It's such a normal part of how the media portrays relationships. Every movie you watch with a love story, like at some point there's some sort of jealousy happening. It's an interesting the being in a relationship like that, or being in a poly relationship of any kind, it doesn't mean necessarily that we're like highly evolved and we don't experience jealousy. You learn very early on that communication is so important. So we end up talking through our feelings ad nauseum, and it gets insane at times. It's like, really, do we have to talk about our feelings this much? But you do, and you learn to find that jealousy is more an outward projection of inward insecurities.
Okay.
Polyamory is not right for everybody, and monogamy and polyamory, it's not like one is better or one is more evolved. It's a choice, and it's whatever a person is comfortable with. But I feel like there's a lot of things that people could learn from relationships like this, to look more inward. What is it about yourself that you're insecure about, that when your partner is looking at someone else, you lose it inside, or fights happen because a partner is talking to someone of the opposite sex or whatever. You learn a lot to, okay, I'm I'm jealous about this particular thing for a very specific reason, and maybe other things you're not jealous about because you're very secure about them. So it's an interesting journey. You learn a lot about yourself very quickly.
I think you perfectly described it, from my own experience, because just the fact that you said, the jealousy stems from the insecurity, that's absolutely amazing. What, you described exactly what I'm experiencing, because in some instances I'm just like, hey, I'm pretty too. And again, why am I having his reaction to something that has, nothing to do with me instantly becoming about me? And the other side of it, it's in the movie itself, it was fascinating that they had that conversation and she said, okay, fine, go. And then even though Elizabeth is describing the not insecurities, the interactions between women, about how Olive is just incredibly beautiful and she's, this is a hindrance to her as well.
Mm-hmm.
They do decide to hire her as the assistant for this disc theory project and ultimately the lie detector test. And so the second Olive is already involved in their projects, there's an immediate confrontation between Olive and Elizabeth, and it's just, I'm like, oh wow, wait, so yes, no, Elizabeth is okay with this but not okay with this?
Yeah, like she was so calm and cool about it, like, oh, do what you want, I'm not your jailer, she'll break your heart, but whatever, do what you gotta do. And then the moment Elizabeth is in the room, she's like, I'm asking you to not fuck my husband, please.
Yes.
And Olive's like, oh my God, I didn't even do anything. What is happening? And I think it's funny. It's very tongue-in-cheek isn't the phrase I'm looking for, but when Bill confronts Elizabeth about it, and he's like, I thought you said you didn't have sexual jealousy. And she's like, I don't, but turns out I've got professional jealousy. So I told her not to fuck my husband.
Right.
It's like, well, all right. There are times where you don't know how you feel until you're thrown into the situation. And I've definitely been there in my poly relationships. Like, oh, wow, I didn't know that was going to bug me, but it does. Okay, good to know for next time. Let's talk about it. Let's not do that again. Yeah. So maybe she was having one of those.
Right. And that's exactly the moment where it's, that communication thing again, if you are part of this. And earlier with what you were describing, it occurred to me when I was watching this and watching their relationship evolve, my first thought was, oh wow, this is a maturity that I don't fully have a grip on. I'm not going to say I don't understand it, but to me it was just like having that level of relationship, trust, communication, and all this other stuff. I feel like I'm throwing my marriage under the bus right now because I'm not in a polyamorous relationship or something.
No, not at all. It's not for everybody, and it doesn't mean that you're not secure or you're not adventurous if it's not something that you're not into. Like, it's just not the thing for some people. And in this movie, this type of relationship, a triad, depending on exclusivity or not, actually can end up not being not that different from a normal monogamous 2-person relationship. There's there's a million different terms in polyamory that get a little ridiculous, and it's like, do we need 6,000 terms to define everything? But there's a term called, the short version of it is polyfi, but it's like polyamorous fidelity, where you can be, a triad is polyamorous in nature because it's not 2 people, it's 3 people. But like in this case of Professor Marston and the Wonder Women, that's exclusive. It's just the 3 of them. They're not seeing any outside partners or anything like that. There are a lot of poly folk that's like complete relationship anarchy. You can have a billion different partners. You got a primary partner maybe, and there's 3 other people that you're seeing, and maybe you're seeing them with your primary, maybe you're not. It gets, I don't know how people have time for that. My partner and I tend to live in the poly-fi zone, where it's like, we only have enough time to focus our energy on one other person. If we can find one person to start with, that's interested in both of us, and we're both interested in her. That in itself is a nearly impossible situation to find. And I think that's one of the things that makes this movie so romantic.
Yes.
They meet in such a organic way. Whereas today, if you're going to be in a relationship like this, it's like, cool, I'm going to hop on Bumble or Tinder, and that's just how you're going to find people that are into the same things. You can't necessarily just go to a bar or even go to a gay bar, in my case, to pick up a woman, because lesbians can sometimes get really offended when you're in a situation where you're a couple dating together. It's like, no, I don't want anything to do with your guy. That's gross, you know? So it's just a totally different landscape. So this movie is just so romantic in that they just meet in a completely normal way and fall in love. I mean, as normal as you can in a situation like this.
And what's great is just having this movie there, because there are so many romantic movies about just, you know, couples just having that thing where it just happened, it was organic, it was beautiful, and then you can have the naysayers that are just like, well, it wouldn't happen that way. You can't just find your true love that way. And I'm just like, yeah, there are all these movies that have these couples that fall in love. Why can't this movie show this thing where this organically happens and moves through? And I think that's kind of a really great thing that the writer and director did, is just, you know, let's watch this happen. Although, much like the realistic couples, the bumps in the road, they just happen to be the complications of society and their relationship, because early through, there's Elizabeth has her hesitation in starting the relationship, and then there's some, you know, positive beats to it, but then word gets out around campus. Oh, we should also mention that Olive has a fiance as well.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
I was very curious how that was going to go, and it was kind of helpful that he wasn't played as the 100% like complete stereotype of the frat guy, this is my fiance ownership type thing, although he got there eventually. But I think that's more of a kind of an anger resentment situation, finding out that your fiance is kind of going behind your back,
right?
So it was interesting, you know, and sure enough, there was actually, he calls them out on it as well.
He does, yeah, that when they're all out on that picnic together, and Olive is asking the like, oh, let's play this game that me and my sorority girls play. Like, let's guess what the other person longs for. And it gets a little, he can just sense the tension between Olive and Elizabeth, because Olive goes on about I think you long to live an unconventional life. And then they like lock eyes, and it's like sex gaze at each other. And I do enjoy the dynamic of, God, I cannot remember the fiance's name for the life of me. What's his name?
It's like Brent or Brant or
Brant, maybe. Not
Brad.
I think it might be Brant. Maybe
it is. It's Brant.
Brant, yes, yeah. For some reason that didn't sound right. He immediately like points out Bill, and he's like, not, because he asks what their intentions are with Olive, and he's like, not you. I know what your intentions are. They're pretty obvious. It's like just that normal thing of like, yeah, dudes are pretty obvious when they're into somebody. But the dynamic between Elizabeth and Olive is so interesting, because Olive really does look for her approval. I think there's definitely a layer of looking up to her and wanting to be, you know, seen in a positive light by her, because she looks up to her and is also falling in love with her at the same time. Right. And I think that Elizabeth is such of a scientist at heart. You know, like she's always observing her feelings and observing what's going on, but the logical side of her brain doesn't let her go there for a very long time, which I can completely relate to, because I kind of end up being that way too. I have a hard time just letting my emotions be my emotions. So
Right. Agreed. And in fact, what was interesting is that even later on in the movie, you find out that Olive had read Elizabeth's papers or publications, I should say. And to me, I wonder, because in the beginning, when she's being interviewed by Bill, it's just like, why did you want this? And by that point, Elizabeth had already confronted Olive about, please don't, do not fuck my husband. She kind of started rambling about how it's just like, oh, this class fit into my schedule, and a couple of my friends said that psychology would be, interesting. And then she started talking about, like, later on, it's just like, she's read the work and she's interested in these things. And I wonder if, of course, you find yourself interested in something, you take the class, but I'm wondering if her connection, not just her, connection to Elizabeth, I'm wondering if there was any sort of falling in love just based off of what she knew about her before she even met her.
Yeah, just like on an intellectual level, almost falling in love with how smart. And I mean, for the time, I'm assuming there weren't a lot of women out there doing that level of scientific or
right,
whatever study you want to call that. It's not all scientific, psychology study, whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Just even the work on the academic level, and the we'll call it scientific studies. I mean, it doesn't have to be making moonshine and exploding chemicals for it to be scientific work.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's and the continuation of it is the decision to be part of this relationship. And when I was watching it, so this was the first time I watched it, Olive becomes pregnant because there's this confrontation where I guess Brandt, said like, this is why are you doing this? And everyone knows. And eventually they have to have a discussion about what's supposed to happen. And then she's pregnant, and the two Marstons get fired from Radcliffe as well. So that's going to put like this real life pressure on them of how are they going to support themselves. They can't do this work that they've worked forever on before. But even though there's this hesitation happening here on Elizabeth's part, and I feel for her a lot, because the movie frames it as that it's her hesitation. She's like the catalyst because of that, what you had said before, the logic, the mind part of it. She's throwing the reality into the situation despite the fact that there's so much happening here that's wonderful in their relationship. Right.
She's the one that's always going like, the world won't let it happen. The world won't let us be together. This is not what people do. Like we're wrong and we're bad for what we're doing, and what we do is illegal. And, she's very, very fact and logic driven. Exactly.
But when Olive, I keep wanting to call her Bella, when Olive has the baby, and you see Elizabeth holding it, and just, the love that is springing from her, from just her husband, her lover, and this baby just coming through. It's just like this moment is enough that all of that logic can go out the window.
Yeah.
As long, still being logical though, as long as it doesn't hurt the children.
Right. Yeah. And we need to figure out a story and stick to it so that we can actually survive in society. Because I don't think it would go over well with the neighbors knowing what's going on. And it doesn't once they figure out what's going on.
Surprise!
Spoiler
surprise.
alert!
Oh, the neighbors. And that was interesting, because as anyone who has listened to my podcast knows, I love a good montage, and there is a wonderful one in this movie with trying to figure out how to work and try to make money, but also adjusting to life with the kids, and the beginnings of Bill's writing. He's not quite creating Wonder Woman yet, but Elizabeth with her ever sharp observations. No one's gonna want to read about disc theory. This is not the way to make money. I'm sorry.
Right. Yeah. He never gives up on being able to talk about, or he never gives up on wanting to get this theory out there, and stumbles upon something like comic books to do it. It's pretty ingenious. It's really cool. I love the way that the storyline weaves all of that into each other. And like, I've seen this movie a million times, so I can read so much into all of it as opposed to your first viewing of it. But, you know, he's throughout the movie, there's this like storytelling mechanism of disc theory and going through, you know, compliance and being submissive and being dominant and all this stuff. And not only does it tie into the way that he's trying to teach through Wonder Woman eventually once he starts making it, but those theories are running through their relationship the entire time.
Right.
And once we get closer to talking about the end of the movie, I'll get into that more, but I love the way that it all ties out in terms of dominance and being submissive, and not in a sexual way, in a relationship way.
Which is incredible because there's a scene later on where he wanders into a lingerie shop is what it says on the outside, but it's full of various other things, and I love the movie Austenland. It is it is sweet and cute and also ridiculous at the same time, because you know the comedy version of the, you know, person falling in love. Sometimes I just can't do it. Sometimes I just want it to be serious. So just like, come on, love is very serious. So how dare you fall on him, and that's how you fell in love. but J.J. Feild, who was in both movies, when he appeared, I'm just like, I don't know where this is going, but I'm on board for wherever he's going to take us. And when he starts asking William, like, are you with this, security agency? I don't know if he said FBI or he's like, are you with the Postal Service? No. I'm like, okay. So it's like, yes, I have to look up who this real person is that he is, that he is portraying right now. And I thought it was very interesting. Is it Charles Guyette?
Yes.
They cut off the names on my app, and I'm like, come on, I'm trying to do a podcast here.
Yeah, so. Self-identified as the G-string king.
Exactly. And that's when they bring in this aspect of bondage. And actually William buys these photographs and he brings them here, and you see, like, look, no, this is exactly what I'm talking about. And they're just like, you realize you just brought pornography into our house,
right? When it's illegal at that point in time.
Exactly. And so he's just like, no, look. And then he points it out. It's literally his disc theory right in front of them. And so once again, you have Elizabeth holding herself back when he brings all three of them to the shop, and just watching this happening. There's a demonstration of just this woman being tied up, but also this wonderful, I wouldn't, is it a monologue? I think it's a monologue.
A bit. Yeah. When he is like tying up the, right. I don't know if she's a model, but like the model for showing how to do it. And he's kind of giving his whole spiel on everything about it. It's great. I personally don't live really in the BDSM world or community. I find it interesting. I've just never really been in a place in my life to explore it.
Sure.
But I love the way that they handle it in this movie. It's the complete opposite of something like 50 Shades of Grey, which tends to frame it in this person is messed up and had some shitty things happen to them, and that's why they're into this pain and torture crap. No, that's not necessarily the case. In this environment, they bring it about in this whole, you play roles every day in your life, and how is it any different to bring that home and into your personal life? And, fantasy is a wonderful outlet. And they just portray it in such a healthy way. And then to see this triad, this throuple, if you will, another word for it, to see them practicing in a healthy way They just, they find that they love having fun that way together. Right. And it's not wholesome isn't the word I would use, but it's wholesome the way that they react to it and adopt it and find that that's something they're into.
Yeah, and the 50 Shades of Grey category, it's what's awkward about that is just like the main character is just like, yeah, I'm so messed up and this is what we do because I want to get off or something like that. Whereas here there is this, the vulnerability involved in not just like, hey, you're totally vulnerable, isn't it hot? No, it's a connection that, again, when there's the three of them involved as well, I thought it was really important that Olive was the one who was interested in it. And then when Bill started to participate in it, immediately Elizabeth was just like, Olive, don't let him do that to you.
Yeah,
and so
the feminist in her was like, no, don't do that.
Yes, this is a thing. But never mind the fact that, as I'm starting to understand more and more with feminists, it's just like, well, wait, is it don't do that because I wouldn't want that done to me, or don't do that because, wait, do you want that? So
yeah, if you want it, that's okay. But as long as you're exercising your will to yes or no, I want it, that's another thing.
Yep, there's that communication thing again.
Right?
Yeah, that's okay though, because eventually there is, again, in the movie version of it, it all manages to resolve itself in the scene itself, and it is a great scene, but to those of you, even though my entire podcast is based off of what movie teaches us about relationships, there's lots of work that's involved to get that level of trust and understanding.
Right.
So
yeah, that's not going to happen immediately. And you even see in that scene when, Elizabeth has her reaction to it, and, it's a very, very quick realization for Olive that, she's drawn to it, and she goes and puts the costume on, and it's such a beautiful visual. And of course that gives you all of the inspiration for Wonder Woman's character with her lasso and the one piece whatever, and then her silver bracelet gauntlet things that she wears and stuff. But even in a normal relationship setting, like figuring out that that's what you're into, and the dominant submissive dynamic is not a very quick and simple thing to figure out. There's so much communication involved. Right. I'm okay with this, I'm not okay with that.
Right.
There's a lot more to it. They definitely simplify it to make it pretty, but yeah.
Again, we only have approximately 2 hours to convey this, so we got to make sure it's,
right.
short and artistic, but also good for the people taking notes. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a wonderful part of the story. And then, of course, there's a eventual confrontation because they've started to incorporate various things into their sex life. And this is when the inevitable, the neighbors find out, sadness, conflict comes into play. And the whole time I'm so angry at the neighbor, as you're meant to, but for just the dumb reason of this, like, I'm sorry, who comes into a person's house with a casserole dish in the middle of the day?
Right? Like, I get that, but yeah, like, I guess Olive technically was the one staying, like, she was like the homemaker of the three of them, so that woman just assumed she'd be home. But also, Bill's not necessarily working steadily yet, so if nobody's answering the door, like, maybe assume people are occupied otherwise. I mean, I guess the neighbor doesn't think that Olive is in a romantic relationship with any of them because she's being portrayed as like a widow that's a widow of a friend of theirs or something. That they're all living together because she's alone. But yeah, like, don't storm into somebody's house. Don't do that.
Right. It's like a twofold, she comes into the home, she discovers something that's none of her business.
Right.
And then in the end, it's it's her business to also, let everyone know about this because of her children. And I'm like, oh,
yeah.
okay.
And to suggest that their children need to be homeschooled because they're bad influences, that just starts getting into that whole world of, we live in a different world now where there's plenty of conflict still around sexuality and race and, all sorts of prejudice and crap and hate crimes. And it still all exists, but this is a very different time. It makes me want to punch that lady in the face.
Oh yeah. And then when her husband is just like the brute force, just evil man. And I'm like, oh geez, what I wouldn't give for, just a way to vaporize just that entirely. Hey, Wonder Woman-y.
Yeah.
So
show up with your lasso and kick his ass.
Oh no, because the lasso, but I don't want him to spew any more truth
That's
out of
true.
his mouth. He needs to. Oh, no, he already has that goal. That ability, and we don't need a lasso of truth for him.
No.
Yeah, and so sad because neighbors are jerk faces, because that's the most I can come up with right now. There's a conflict, and Elizabeth is the one who has Olive leave, and I can't remember if Bill was he wasn't there for that conversation, and he was definitely very upset when Olive left.
Yeah, Elizabeth that's kind of the point when obviously the relationship kind of takes a break because Olive leaves. Elizabeth is upset, and it's starting to negatively affect the children. So this needs to be done. You need to leave. Right. Which the moment she said that, I was like, well, hey, I understand that like you and Bill are the established married couple, but do you have to be so rude about it? Like, you have to leave. Yeah. Her whole life is with you guys. Like, she moved with you. She had a baby with you, and you're just like, it's not like she can just go back to her apartment, like they've moved away together,
sure.
So, yeah. But yeah, I think that conversation happened without Bill. So then he's very like, what happened? Why are you doing this? And as Olive is leaving and getting in the car, she's like, I didn't make this decision.
It's so heartbreaking, and again, if following beats of just a couple in a relationship, here's like the big catalyst for the breakup. And I'm just like, ooh, I hope this is going to follow the formula of everyone coming back together again. But when stories are based on a true story, it's just like, ooh, this can go in a bunch of different places, and you want to see something a little bit. Yeah. And here, of course, here I'm rooting for something that I know is so complicated, but at the same time doesn't have to be because of the outside forces involved.
Right.
And again, it's my sympathy with Elizabeth, but at the same time, just so angry. Because from my outside perspective, I'm just like, no, you love each other. Isn't that enough?
Right. Can't love be enough.
Which is the exact thing that she was struggling with, her, on her own as well. But again, I'm not out to make her the side villain of the story.
No, she's just the one that's not. She's not as quick and easy to fall, Yep. And I completely. I think this is why I identify with her so much, because my partner happens to be the person that can fall in love with someone at the drop of a hat, and I'm like, okay, we don't even know this person. We don't know if our life goals match up. Like, Jonah and I don't want to have children. We're in our 30s. A lot of people we meet either already have kids or they want to have kids still. And it's like, if we meet someone and they want to have children, that's something we can't give them. Like, don't get your hopes up. No. But he's just he's such an emotional being. He's a musician. Right. He is just very emotive. He's got a huge heart, and it just like barfs up onto everything. And I feel, in comparison, like emotionally stunted sometimes, because it's just not as easy for me to like be vulnerable in that way. Because I also feel like I'm bringing an element into my happy relationship that could cause my partner pain if it doesn't work out. And of course, I don't mind being there to pick up the pieces, but I'm mama bearing because I don't want this to hurt him, let alone, but also, think about myself a little, like, is it going to hurt me if I actually let that person in? And Elizabeth has so many problems just like letting it all in and like, okay, you're my people. We're together. You know, Olive and Bill are so quick to just, we love each other and that's enough. Let's do it. But Elizabeth never can just, I mean, it's not until the end, really, that she changes her tune.
It was a interesting scene. So to get us there, we're bouncing back and forth between it's not a trial, but more like a panel of Wonder Woman being put under scrutiny by this woman who represents, we'll call it the Parents Worried for the Sake of Our Children organization.
Yeah, an organization that could get Wonder Woman pulled indefinitely.
Yeah, exactly.
I can't remember, but...
awesome. But while going through that, that ends, and Bill has, it actually seemed like it was a heart attack in the way that it was filmed, but I think the reality is he was just having a reaction to what the movie later tells us is cancer.
He's not long for this world after that, unfortunately.
Right, and I made the assumption that it was lung cancer because there was lots of smoking going on, but I could be wrong. It could be various other forms. The point is... I can't
remember if I figured out what kind of cancer it was. I was trying to research them, but either way.
Yeah, exactly. Again, when it's based on real people, it's so easy to just kind of click on through and see what's happening. But it's the, if we're talking in shorthand of, movies, this is the big... horrible outside the relationship thing that's going to bring the people back together, because as it turns out, the squabbles of what we had break us up isn't more important than this large thing where we all need to come back together again. And I watched Olive come back, and I commend her for being someone who was so open in the beginning to be shut off as she was, and it's sad, but at the same time, though, completely understandable to come back to them.
Yeah, it's interesting how it gave this terrible thing that's happening. He's sick, he's dying, whatever, gives them the perspective on like, okay, I'm gonna be gone someday, and you're going to be kicking yourself, Elizabeth, you're going to be kicking yourself for the rest of your life because you let her get away and you love her. And it's in that ending scene when he basically forces Elizabeth to apologize to Olive. It's in that moment, it comes full circle with his disc theory, the dominance, inducement, submission and compliance. Elizabeth has been so dominant throughout the movie, and more, and the dominant to Olive's submissive a lot of the time. But this was a time when she had to give up that dominance and get down on her knees and beg for Olive's forgiveness and for her to come back and to love them. And it's a beautiful moment because she does. It's one of those moments too, that you can in a triad like that. You learn to love these people that you're in a relationship with, and they get to know you almost better than you know yourself. And it's like Bill knows she's getting in her own way if I don't push her to put this shit behind her and just beg for Olive to come back. Like, Olive's not going to come back if she doesn't feel like Elizabeth isn't truly sorry and doesn't truly want her, So it's just such a wonderful moment for so many reasons.
Right. And Olive just, not taking the first apology from Elizabeth in the beginning. It's just it
was kind of a shitty apology to start. It was not very heartfelt. She's like, no,
Yeah. And that's why I think it's great that she didn't, because it would just be so easy to be like, yeah, I miss my people, of course. And then just, again, it's Bill looking out for all of them as a whole, even if he's going after Elizabeth in a manner of speaking, calling her out on it, I think is a better way of putting it, because in a vacuum, watching that scene, it's so easy to go like, just like, no, stop harping on her. But the other side of it's just like, oh, I don't want to admit that about me and myself, and how I am so closed off and I need to be in control of everything. So of course I defend her. But when you don't want to admit that Bill has a point,
right? You
just want to go like, knock it off, Bill. Leave her alone. Yeah.
They'll force her to apologize, but yeah, she needs an extra push to get past that character flaw. She has a bit of a character flaw in that she's so closed off and can't be wrong.
Right. And it takes the people that know her the best to confront her on it, and it is very nice to watch. It's I don't know, it's no proposal in a ballpark or something tropey and cliche like that. It's so much better. So no, it was great. And then by that point in the movie, do they go to the title cards where they say what happens?
Yeah, I think directly after that, after Olive is like, yes, I want to be with you for all of my days, and we need to get a new stove because the stove you guys have sucks. And they're like, okay, if the stove is what it takes to get you back, all right, we'll do it. We'll buy a new one.
Sure.
But then it cuts to them like walking through the park with the end credits, which is really, really great to learn what happens in the rest of their life.
It does. So I'll go to what we usually ask. It's when do you think they fell in love?
I have notes on that.
Ooh, okay.
So, I mean, it's an interesting situation because it's not just two people. There's a lot of people. Three people, but it has a lot more room for interpretation. Obviously, we come into it with Bill and Elizabeth already together, already married, already love each other, already know each other, and then we're introduced to Olive. One thing that I think is interesting to note from my perspective, in a triad, it will sound exhausting, but you can have up to 7 different relationships occurring at any given time. So, of course, you have the main, all 3 people. So, in this case, Bill, Elizabeth, and Olive. You have just Bill and Elizabeth. You have just Elizabeth and Olive. You have just Olive and Bill. And then you have these interesting dynamics of like Bill and Elizabeth as a unit and Olive, or the 2 women as a unit and Bill, or Olive and Bill as a unit and Elizabeth. So there's all these different dynamics going on at any given time with all these different, in this case, dominance and being submissive is a huge theme in this movie, but it leads to a lot of different like, when does this person fall in love with this person? Does it all happen simultaneously? And it doesn't necessarily all happen at the same time. And that's the truth of polyamory too. And it's something that it's kind of hard for people to wrap their heads around sometimes. We know that Bill is enamored with Olive from the beginning. I don't know that he's in love with her to start. But it becomes obvious pretty quickly that Olive loves Elizabeth, or is falling in love with her, especially when they go on the first picnic with her fiance with the plane. And she says, I see you in everything you do. I think you're magnificent. And in that moment, you're like, oh, shit, Olive loves Elizabeth. And then, we have some more like blatant moments where we're dealing with them testing the lie detector test. Like they invented the lie detector. They didn't patent it. So they're not.
Right.
Unfortunately, they don't get credited with the invention of it officially. But they do, once they figure out how to test it, they test Bill and they find out that Bill loves Olive because Elizabeth asks him and he says no and it spikes because he's lying, which is a wonderful storytelling device. Who knows if it actually happened that way, but that's, movie magic for you. And there's a moment, obviously it's like you can tell the main moment where you're like, okay, Elizabeth is finally letting herself go and letting herself fall when they have the sex scene between all three of them in the theater, which is pretty steamy. But yeah, and I think from then on out, they're all pretty much hopelessly attached and in love with each other. And one moment that I really, really love is when, when was it? I forget what the circumstance is, but Elizabeth and Bill are sitting together. And does Elizabeth ask him why he loves her or something? But he says he loves Elizabeth because she's brilliant and ferocious and hilarious and a grade A bitch. But then he goes off to say, previous to that, he says that he loved, Olive is beautiful and she's innocent and pure of heart and whatever. And it really demonstrates for you that the way in which Bill loves them differently. And this is the way that I will explain how polyamory is even possible to people. And they're like, oh God, I could never love two people at once. And it's like, well, you can love more than one child at once. You have a baby and you have a kid and you go, oh my God, I could never love anything as much as I love this child here in front of my face right in this moment. And then you have a second kid and you're like, oh wow, I love them both. Maybe I don't love one more than the other, but I love them in very different ways.
Right.
And so that was just a beautiful moment in which Bill, explains why he loves them both and for very different reasons. So that's a very long-winded answer to your question, but
no, it's well, you also explained the dynamics involved that are not as cut as dry. Especially, thank you. I would love a diagram of the relationships that you just described when you said that there were 7. And I really had to chew on that. And I'm just like, wait a minute. So no, this is how math works. Well, this couple here. That's my damage of thinking of how it works together. I'm like, oh, you're right. The units and the this and the, oh, okay. Yes. Ooh, amazing. So that was not long-winded. That was informative.
Oh, well, thank you.
So if I'm going to answer the question in a different way, I mean, Elizabeth described to Olive that she and Bill had known each other for a very long time, and she actually says with kind of some, again, it's that logic of hers again, where she's saying like, well, he's basically, he's somebody who understands that she's going to be, constantly educating herself and moving forward. And he's someone who, and she says with sadness, just like, where else am I going to find that? And
in that time, yeah.
Right. And it's so heartbreaking to hear it, but at the same time, it makes sense. And it works to that very, what's considered to be cold and logical, which is, no, it's also protective and smart. So there's no reason to just kind of like, make the sad face because you've got the cynical one over here and you've got the one who's opening up her heart up so easily. When Bill described how he loved them in the different ways, you see it, but that doesn't mean that one is better than the other.
Right.
Because according to him, together they make the perfect woman. And my instinct to that is just like, well, screw you, there is no perfect woman. And he's like, yeah, and I have 2 of them right here. Yeah. So what's the problem?
Yeah, if there's one thing that like a moment where I'm just like, can it? he's doing a thing where he's like, yeah, together you're the perfect woman. And it's like, well, but they don't exist to be a perfect woman for you. Just leave it at that they're two, you love them for different reasons. Let's just leave it there. Because I think it's a better description of the way that type of relationship works. Like, that they don't exist to be your perfect woman. But it's not like the movie is about that or anything. But that's just a moment when I'm like, don't say that.
Right. No, that's perfect, actually, because it's just like, I don't want to crap on it, but at the same time, though, grr. Yeah. So
cut that line.
I guess. Yeah. Well, I guess we're saying I guess both can happen at the same time, so we'll go with that. So like you said, established relationship. It kind of stands to reason. I'm going to say that, strictly from my interpretation of it, I really think that Olive was in love with Elizabeth even before their first encounter. And I think that's why she reacted as horribly as she did. I mean, anyone would understandably react to someone coming up to them and saying, "Don't fuck my husband."
Right.
But I think that's why it was just so deeply rooted in what her reaction was. It's just like, oh my God, I'm in love with this woman. And I thought that was going to be the direction. Again, if I had written this would be so cliche filled of just like, no, I'm not in love with him. I'm in love with you. And then wait, that's horrible writing. Let's so thank goodness that was not what happened. But sure enough, the thing continues. And again, I can't really speak to it because I feel like, because there's more interaction between Olive and Elizabeth, it's easier for me to think that she fell in love with Elizabeth first. But if you look at the personalities again of Bill instantly enamored with Olive because of her beauty, and Olive with her heart open, which is kind of amazing because she describes her life of how she was her mother. So her aunt was Margaret Sanger.
Yeah.
And her mother was Edith Byrne.
Yeah.
And so you have these women who are part of, incredible movements for feminism, but she was raised by nuns because of some circumstances involving with her mother and her father and her grandparents, I suppose. She ended up being raised by none of them. And so even though she is someone who has these circumstances of just kind of turmoil in her immediate family unit, she's able to just still love openly and,
right.
So I think that's kind of amazing. So if I'm interpreting this in my way, I think it's, she was in love with Elizabeth. She saw the dynamic between the two of them. And then because her heart was open as it is, she loved them both. And for me, it's really difficult to pinpoint because Elizabeth is such a kind of a closed off book, I'll say. And I could definitely see it when she was holding their baby.
Yeah, she let her wall down.
So I'm going to say definitely by that point, but her hesitance throughout the whole thing, even though she was participating. I don't know if you listen to Dan Savage, who does the Savage Love Cast, but he has an expression, poly under duress. And because I've been listening to his podcast for so long, I'm just like, is this one of those situations where Elizabeth is poly but under duress? And, that's not to say that it's, going to result in only bad and she's just making this sacrifice because, obviously it opens up to where it's a wonderful thing for her as well. But it's just, again, my radars are up because I learned something from a podcaster once. And so...
Well, no, you're not wrong. There's a lot of, I think in this world of dating apps and whatnot, there's a lot of stuff that goes on that's not necessarily healthy polyamory. There are a lot of couples out there that, are looking to just have fun. They want to experience swinging. They just want to bring a third person into their relationship just for some fun. They're not necessarily looking to date, but there can be a lot of negative connotations with some of that because there are a lot of couples out there that are not in a good place and they think, ooh, this is a Band-Aid to fix my relationship. And I feel so bad for that third person that decides to walk into that trap, that bear trap, because that's just going to end badly.
Right.
This movie kind of shows you like, oh, okay, so there's this couple, like obviously, you know, Bill and Elizabeth are perfect and they have their own problems and, you know, professional and otherwise. But they're like a solid starting ground. Like they have, for the most part, a healthy dynamic. And then bringing in this third person, obviously there's still more stuff to work on and more barriers to get past and communication that needs to happen that throughout the movie does or does not occur. I mean, it's not good communication when Elizabeth kicks Olive out and doesn't even talk to Bill about it. You can't make that decision for the whole group. That doesn't work that way. But yeah, for a little while there, you know, that's definitely an observation that I think you could make. Like, is she just going along with this for the fun of it? She's like, okay, yeah, I am having some attraction, so I'm gonna, you know, doesn't she say that too when they offend Olive, or Olive isn't going to hang out with them anymore, and Elizabeth is like, I'm open to exploring this dynamic and these feelings that we have. So, you know, if you'd like to have sex with us, I'm open to that. Like, says it so blatantly.
So clinical.
Yeah. And it's like, no. And then at that point, they're like, we'll just stay friends for now.
Yeah, let's do that.
But yeah, until she really lets her guard down, you don't really know, is this going to end well?
Yeah. And it's funny because you have to watch her do it over and over again. Again, it takes practice. It's not, my guard is down and now the relationship is smooth. It's ongoing. Yeah. I mean, if only it was just a one-time thing, like the first time you ride a roller coaster or something. Hooray!
Yeah.
It's over.
Relationships aren't that easy, sadly.
Why not? Oh, right.
Why can't they just be fairy tales? Come on.
But the good ones.
Yes.
The good fairy tales.
Yes.
So, yeah. And then, not to oversimplify him, but I think Bill just falls in love at first sight. Just, you know, sees this. And the fact that, but what's great is that, actually, hold on a second, because he isn't exactly portrayed as somebody who's just like, I'm in love with her, I'm in love with her, I'm in love with, you know, and just, you know, this person and this person and this person. So what's kind of amazing is that he's, again, it's the way the movie's portraying it, and so he is someone who fell in love with at first sight, but at the same time, it was able to grow in a way that was just more magnificent than just like someone who just falls in love a lot,
right? You know? And I think there was one scene in between the hospital and them walking in the park with the credits. Wasn't there like some sort of award ceremony or something like that, where Bill was giving a speech and talking about how Wonder Woman was based off of women in his life, and like Olive and Elizabeth are standing in the back together or something. And and yeah, I think the undertones of you know, Bill and Elizabeth from the beginning being such feminists, the both of them, that you know, this relationship, he looks at it in a very non-misogynistic way. And I think I read through a few different reviews of it, and like a lot of reviews talked about, you know, how the director, Angela Robinson, is that right? Yeah. How, you know, you could tell that it was a woman telling this story, because even when the women are, you know, splayed out in front of you with their boobs out, and you know, they're having like the most like, you know, sexual scene ever, it's still through, you know, hazy lighting, and you know, the way that the whole scene is set up, there's no misogyny in there anywhere. And even when Bill is the one getting attention, he's laid down and his arms are tied back, and and Olive is the one being dominant over him. She's on top, and then Elizabeth is standing behind, and the two women are going back and forth between focusing on each other and him. So it's just, he doesn't have he obviously has the propensity to fall in love with multiple women. He's not some like hound dog.
Right.
Which is a really great male character that I don't think you get to see very often.
I agree. Yeah. And going back to that particular scene, that was, it had so much potential for, I imagine a lot of people, where if this movie was mismarketed, just like, what? This is about like a throuple? Yeah. And then, they come in for that. And then this is the sex scene that they're given. And it's just, it's handled with such care. And I think it's really great. And I don't want to be very amused by the people who were disappointed by how beautiful it was, instead of just like totally
I'm
hot.
sure there are probably people going into it, they're like, yeah, I want to see it. A threesome. Yeah. And then like, oh, actually it's very like consensual and loving, and obviously they're having fun and a little bit of kink, even though they don't know that's really what they're doing. I do love though the way that scene starts with Olive runs off, and Elizabeth goes after her, and like it really does show the dynamic between the three of them and like the dominance and submissive parts that are going on. I think that Olive had feelings for both of them pretty early on, but I think she didn't really fully let her feelings for Bill out until she had Elizabeth's approval to do so.
Oh, that's a really good call.
There's Elizabeth and Olive are in the theater, and they have their first, not their first kiss, but they're having their first consensual, they want to kiss each other. And Bill comes in, and Elizabeth waves him over, like, please come join us. And she kisses him, and then she turns and is like presenting the opportunity for Olive and Bill to go to each other, and they do. And it's one of those things where Olive is always seeking her approval, and even before they know that they're gonna get into BDSM and all of those dynamics, they're doing it from the beginning.
Right And it just, again, what you described with the relationship dynamics, and how you've got Elizabeth and Olive at the beginning of that scene, and then when you walk in and with Bill coming in as well, he's seeing them interact with one another, but it's also Bill and Olive deferring to Elizabeth, and how they are able to just, again, they're similar in that regard, where it's just like, no, we can open our hearts up like this, and then, hey, Elizabeth, this is okay. And they both have that, and it's just, again, I'm going to be drawing a diagram, and it's amazing.
Well, and if you want to learn another new poly word, there's a term that a lot of polyamorous people use. It's called compersion, which is experiencing joy in the joy of others. And compersion is a really big part of polyamory. You experience joy in your partner, experiencing joy. And not only in that whole sex scene do you see it in a bunch of different ways, because inevitably in a three-way situation, somebody's sort of off to the sideline while the other two people are focusing on each other. It just happens. But even earlier in the movie, when Elizabeth makes the discovery about, Olive was lying about something, and she's like, wait, her breath picks up, like her her heart rate increases. And Bill's like, well, we can't measure heart rate. We tried. She's like, but the systolic blood pressure, you can fucking measure that. And they get all excited. And like Olive is standing there and watching Bill and Elizabeth. They're so excited at their discovery, and they're jumping up and down and yelling and hugging each other. And Olive just has this look on her face of just like pure enjoyment of seeing their joy. And then Bill runs over and hugs Olive, and then Elizabeth is kind of seeing them celebrate together. So that's compersion in a non-sexual way. So that's the other poly lesson of the day.
So the movie does a fantastic job of the full arc of the creation of their relationship and the complexities of it, the things that are going to stop their relationship in various ways. And we mentioned there's kind of like a, you know, not a title card, but basically just like some text over there, you know, showing them as they are after, you know, the speech Bill makes about the comic. And then it says, you know, this happened to Bill and this happened to Elizabeth and this happened to Olive and their children, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the movie gives us a, you know, to the end of what happens next, because it said that Elizabeth was 100 years old when she passed away, which is awesome.
Yeah. Gosh, yeah, the timeline of that. Yeah, I have a note I copied down, I think, from Wikipedia that he died in 47 and he was 54 years old. And then Elizabeth and Olive continued to live together till Olive died in 1990 and she was 86.
Yep.
And then Elizabeth died in 93 at 100. It'd be really sad to live those last 14 years alone.
I was just thinking about that. Yeah, it reminds me of my grandmother, where she
mine too.
It was over a decade without my grandfather, and I just thought it was like, wow, just, you know, really long time. She never remarried, but actually my grandfather on my other side, he did. So, you know, he passed away, or, you know, my grandmother passed away and then my grandfather remarried, so it's not the same. No. You know? But so even though the movie kind of, you know, gives us that information based off of the real life people, do you have anything, because ordinarily we say, you know, what happens next, but I want to make sure you have the opportunity to share anything you wanted to share about that.
Yeah, no, I mean, just kind of reading into it, I mean, they you know, continue on with he continues on with Wonder Woman, and you know, Wonder Woman goes through various changes throughout her lifetime up and, you know, through today. So that's a whole interesting timeline of events. I did read when I was kind of reading up on all three of them that, you know, they don't really touch on anything that Olive does, but Olive does publish some works around psychology and stuff. And I think there was even something that like he ended up publishing that she helped on, but it had to be published under his name, and she published under like a pseudonym of like Richard Byrne or Olive Richard or something, because she's a woman, and, you know, so obviously it doesn't really like tie into their whole love story to go into her journey as to whatever she does in the rest of her life. But sounds like she was pretty accomplished in their area of study as well.
Sure. No, that's a great observation. I failed to throw that in there, so I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, again, the movie gives us as much as there is. I mean, there's no reason to get meta about it, where it's just like, well, all of this happened, and then a movie was made about their life, and then it continues on, and then it got talked about on a podcast at least once. So yeah, If you've gotten this far, I should have said it earlier. I mean, I recommend you going out to see this movie. It's very wonderfully done, and it's a beautiful love story that, you know, depending on where you are with your types of relationships, has the potential to tap on so many different types of people to where you can see yourself reacting in certain ways.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, it's definitely it's a great opportunity to educate oneself onto, you know, what different types of relationships and what they look like, you know, even in the scope of just looking at movies about queer relationships. We're not even necessarily at a place where that should be where it is. You know, most movies you see now about I say queer instead of just homosexual because I'm bisexual, and so there's there's all those shades of gray in between. So just under the queer umbrella, most of the time it's, oh, these people are gay or whatever they identify as, and it's this horrible tragic thing, and somebody dies, and, you know, it's Brokeback Mountain, or it's, you know, any of the other, you know, big huge blockbustery movies that are out there. So it's very much. I mean, they definitely have their trials and tribulations in this movie, but you do get to see a happy ending to a certain extent.
Right.
That's why it's kind of such a big deal this past like holiday season when the movie Happiest Season came out on Hulu, but backed by major studios, and is a Christmas rom-com with a lesbian couple at the heart of it. And the story is told, and it ends just the way that any heterosexual rom-com story would. And we don't get enough of that. We really don't. And same like with Schitt's Creek being such a big deal, you know, that in a very healthy way shows a non-heterosexual relationship bloom and be beautiful, and just the way you would with anything else. So if anything, watching a movie like this is great to normalize different types of relationships.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm just thinking, like, when we get to the point, it's not when a movie like this is made and, you know, a movie like Happiest Season happens. It's just like, no, when there are just like really generic crappy versions of non-heterosexual relationships out there flooding the market,
then we'll know we're in a much better place society-wise.
Yeah, it's really a shame that like so much scrutiny happens, because it's just like, well, this is the only one that's coming out, so it has to be perfect, it has to be amazing, it has to make sure everyone loves it, and
it has to be serious. It has to be like, you know, either an indie movie from like an art house, whatever, or it has to be a big successful blockbuster. You know, it's like, no, it can just be shitty too, and be the same shitty stories we've watched a million times with other rom-coms or what have you.
Exactly. So yes, so when we get to see that, and then it's not deemed a failure because of the fact that it's a queer couple, and then we just get to make more and more and more and more,
right?
Then Mallory, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. It's really a joy to be able to talk about this movie, and I'm sure on Movie Lovers we'll discuss it at some point. But I told Jonah, I was like, do you want to double dip? Do you want to watch this with me, and we'll take notes and we can record an episode, whatever? And he's like, we just watched it like 6 months ago, and I imagine, you know, if we meet somebody and we end up, you know, dating someone again, we're going to want to watch it again, because it's one of our movies that it's like, oh, we're starting to, you know, see someone like, let's watch Professor Marston and the Wonder Women, because it's the kind of love story we can all enjoy. He's like, I'll wait, you know, we'll do it at some point on the podcast, but I'm like, okay. So it was nice to be able to talk about it.
No, that's fantastic. And you'll have something to look forward to when you do decide to talk about it on your podcast. Yeah, that's great. How can they find you on social media, especially, you know, Movie Lovers?
Yeah, so we actually just launched. Our first 2 episodes are out right now. We did an episode on E.T., which was my pick. So that's what we do on Movie Lovers. We go back and forth. Every other episode, one of us picks the movie, whether the other person wants to watch it or not. They get 0 veto power. But our first episode was my pick. I did E.T. because that's my favorite movie of all time. And then episode 2, Jonah picked Bloodsport, which I'm not a huge Jean-Claude Van Damme fan, but whatever. I couldn't veto it. So that's what we do. And we talk about all sorts of different categories of serious and not serious things. But yeah, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram using the handle Movie Lovers Pod, and our website is also movieloverspod.com.
Excellent. And I'll definitely link to those in the show notes, so anyone who happens to be on the road right now can write that down. You're covered, no problem. You can continue the conversation with Twitter and Instagram at HEAMCast. That's HEAMCAST. And you can also find us on Facebook at Happily Ever Aftermath. Mallory, this has been wonderful. I want to thank you 6 more times. But I'll be reasonable and just say thank you again.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, Diana. I had a great time, and I look forward to listening to more episodes of your podcast. I went back and I listened to your episode on The Cutting Edge, which, yeah, I was like looking for a good, like, obscure movie that I hadn't seen in a while. And I was like, yes, I love this movie. So it's lots of awesome episodes I'm excited to listen to while I'm working.
Thank you so much. Okay, so until next time, may your aftermath be happy.